Chagurim Sameach to everyone. A very happy Chanukah. I'm thanking all of you for joining us this evening, and we're very privileged to have Rabbi Dr. David Novak. He's going to present Chanukah. Is it a Halakhic problem? Also want to, I noticed that Hacham Sassoon is on the call or on the webinar, so I want to pay notice to Hacham Sassoon. This is being recorded, as everyone heard. We are all muted, with the exception of Rabbi Novak, Noah, and myself, so that this will mitigate any background noise. But if you have questions, which we will likely address at the end, we will try to address at the end, please feel free to share those in the chat. By way of introduction, my name is Rabbi Andrew Schultz. I serve as the executive coordinator of the Union for Traditional Judaism. Allow me to make mention of several generous sponsors and supporters. So we have Dr. Yehudi Feldman, David Freudenstein, Ronald Grant, Sandy Hausler, Michael Rubinoff, Hacham Sassoon, and Noah Gradovsky himself, who is has contributed in memory of his father, whose yahrzeit is this upcoming Shabbat. Those who are new to UTJ, just words of introduction. We are a group of rabbi scholars and lay people who advocate for a passionate and open-minded approach to the study of Torah and the observance of halakha, rooted in classical religious sources and informed by modern scholarship. And presumably most of you who are on this call know a little bit about UTJ, but I feel the responsibility nonetheless just to reiterate what our philosophy is. And something else that I believe really distinguishes us is looking at the symbiotic relationship between faith and our God-given Torah, with intellectual integrity and emphasis on the same sacred framework of halakha, and that is our unifying guide. So now, just to give a little bit of background on Rabbi Novak, Rabbi Dr. Novak, and just on a personal note, I have had over the last few months several interactions with Rabbi Novak, who has helped me and guided me in navigating some complex halakhic issues that I am encountering in my own community, and I'm grateful to Rabbi Novak for assisting me. One of the founding members of the Union for Traditional Judaism, and I know you're humble, Rabbi Novak, but you are a recognized scholar in Talmud and theology, having served on UTJ's panel of halakhic inquiry, has led the panel of halakhic inquiry, and a significant contributor to Tomech Kahalacha, which is one of our publications. I'm sorry, we'll just give me a moment. My screen closed out on me. Sorry. Rabbi Novak is a disciple of Rabbi Lieberman of blessed memory, also the author of many books and scholarly works. And Rabbi Novak has served as professor emeritus of the J. Richard and Dorothy Schiff Chair at the Jewish Studies at the University of Toronto, a consulting scholar and member of the board of advisors of the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institution at Princeton University. So I hope that I covered your bio, Rabbi Novak. There's, I'm sure, much more to say, and it gives me great pleasure to now turn the floor over to you, so we will have the opportunity and the zechut to learn Torah with you this evening.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Schultz. I wish everybody Chagurim Sameach on this is the last night of Hanukkah. I hope you've all enjoyed the holiday, and this is an opportunity for us to discuss some of the background of the holiday of Chanukah. First of all, I entitled this, "Is Chanukah a Halakhic Problem?" In retrospect, I should have titled it, Was Chanukah Halakhic Problem? B'zman hazeh, it is not a halachic problem. Some problems arise. I see Rabbi Shlomo Siegel here, and he wrote a very fine tshuva on behalf of the panel of halakhic inquiry. Are people permitted to use an electric Chanukah? Is this considered to be the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Hadlakat Nerot? So that is a problem, but the formulation in the formative period of the halacha, Chanukah is a tremendous problem. The problem with it is that how do we institute a Jewish holiday with the appropriate rituals and prayers that has absolutely no connection to the Bible? People tried to find, the Ramban tried to find some remazim, some hints of it, but the hints are like all hints, the result of homiletic ingenuity. And the question there is, how does one institute a new Jewish holiday that has no biblical connection whatsoever? And number two, how does one say that the main mitzvah of this holiday, the lighting of the Chanukah lights, is something that God has commanded us? Those are the two questions that one needs to address. And they are addressed in some of the sources that I'm going to quote today. And undoubtedly, this was an area where there was not total agreement among the sages. Eventually, it emerged as the holiday we know it now, but at that time, there was a considerable dispute. First of all, Chanukah is a takana, an enactment of the rabbis. Nobody disputes that. Now, did the rabbis sit down and say, let's have a holiday called Chanukah? It seems to be, from the historical record, that Chanukah is the celebration of two nisim, two miracles. One is the miracle that we all celebrate by lighting the lights of the flask of oil that under normal circumstances would only burn one day and burn 8 days for like the Shmona Yemei Muluim, the 8 days of dedication of the Mishkan in the wilderness, and also of the first temple built by Solomon. And, excuse me. And the second miracle is the miracle of the Maccabees, the house of Hashmonai, defeating the Hellenized Syrians and their Jewish collaborators in the land of Israel. So Masarta Giborim Biad Chalashim Rabbi Mi'aba'atim, handed over the mighty to the weak, and the few, the many to in the hands of the few. That is the celebration. Now, it seems to be that the rabbis didn't sit down and say, let's have a holiday Hanukkah. It seems to be that the people were already celebrating the military political victory. The military political victory. And the rabbis, the Tanaim, the rabbis up until the publication of the Mishnah, it seems wanted to give what was basically a celebration of military success and political independence, a religious meaning. And that was similar to the fact one could compare it to Simchat Bet HaShoeva, the water drawing ceremony on the on going into the second day of Sukkot, in the days when the temple stood, which was clearly originally a Jewish Bacchanalia, and the rabbis attempted to give it a religious meaning, not condemning it, but transforming it. And that seems to be the case with Hanukkah, plus the fact that the Maccabees fell out of favor with the rabbis because some of two of the descendants of Judah Maccabee, Alexander and Aristobulus, in a political quarrel, invited the Romans to come in and settle the dispute. Inviting the Romans in to settle a dispute was like taking the mafia as a partner in your business. There was no way of getting rid of them. So the rabbis, especially Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who seems to have been on the path of reconciliation with the Romans after the Bar Kokhba revolution, wanted to emphasize the religious character of Chanukah, the nace of the oil, rather than the nace of the military and political victory. Now, the Talmud itself recognizes this, and therefore it says in Masechet Shabbat 23a, my Mavarech, what is the proper bracha? And Talmud Bavli says, Asher Kedishanu Mitzvah Tzvanu Lelek Ner Shel Chanukah, which is exactly what we do today. Heichan Sivanu. Now, where is it commanded? And also, what is been commanded? That is the question. Heichan Sivanu. And Rabbi Avia Amar Lotosor, he said, quoting the end of the verse in Parshat Shoftim in Deuteronomy 17, which speaks of the Sanhedrin, Al Piyat Rosh Yerucha, according to the Torah which they shall instruct you, V'al Mishpat Asher Yomru Lecha Taseh Lo Tasur Min Hadavar Asher Yagidu Lecha Yamei V'Smol. You shall not depart from this, the matter which they tell you, neither to the left or to the right. In other words, the authority of the Sanhedrin to make these decrees. Now, the Peshat in Sefer Devarim is simply the Sanhedrin ruling on biblical law. But the rabbis interpreted it as the power of the Sanhedrin to make new laws and new institutions, which we call takanot. Now, there are three kinds of takana. There is one kind of takana, which is a judicial procedure to correct what would be an unjust result of a law that was intended to be just. For example, the Takana of Hillel, where you transfer your debts in the sabbatical year. The cancellation of debts was originally meant to benefit the poor, but people were not lending to the poor. So therefore, the intent of the law was subverted by proper practice, and it needed correction. But the takana is, in terms of creating new religious institutions, is something that there are two kinds of takanot. One type of takana is a biblically ordained practice that, according to biblical standards, cannot be observed now, but the rabbis want to preserve it nonetheless. Eating more, the bitter herb on Pesach, which is technically only connected to the offering of the Paschal Lamb, of the Korban Pesach. And then there are takanot, which seem to have no connection to a biblical practice, that seem to be a total innovation. Now, Hanukkah is not a total innovation. It is something that was preceded by, most historians think this, preceded by popular practice. But as a mitzvah de Rabbanan, as a rabbinically ordained and structured mitzvah, this is the case with Hanukkah. Now, the question is, if this is a rabbinic enactment, why is the bracha asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah? Where did God command this? Where did God command this? And in fact, there is a machloket in Talmud Yerushalmi, in the third parak, the third chapter of Masechet Sukkah, which is the following. They said, how do we, what bracha do we make on Hanukkah? Rav Amar, asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlakat ner Hanukkah, lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. It's very similar. But Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, we say al mitzvat zakenim, which is technically the case. In other words, God didn't command this directly. This was rather something that the rabbis interpreted, Deuteronomy 17, as the Torah gives the Zakenim, the elders, the rabbinic authorities, the power to make new institutions. So therefore, truth be told, this is Hechan Sivanu. Where is this commanded? It's only commanded to listen to the rulings of the sages. That is what the commandment is. So therefore, that it makes perfect sense, and therefore the question is, how did we get Asher Kedishanu Mitzvotav Etzivanu Ladlik Ner, saying that God has directly commanded this commandment? And this is discussed by Rabbeinu Nissim Gerondi, the Ran, who died in 1380, one of the great Spanish halachists, Rishonim, and therefore he says that the Ran says that Rabbi Avia thought that all of the rabbinic enactments are based on lo tasur, you shall not depart from what the rabbis say, and therefore some of them are kagon Chanukah smuchen al toalav, and some are like the Chanukahites that are based upon that period. But there are other rabbinic enactments that have some biblical basis. In Sukkah, they talk about the Arava taking the lulav during the days of Chol Hamoed Sukkot, which was only done in the temple. So how do we derive that? Well, the Yerushalmi says that if we say Asher Kedishanu Mitzvotav Ladlik Ner Shel Chanukah, which has no biblical basis, the lulav, taking the arba minim, the four species which we called on the name of the lulav, does have a biblical basis. So if you say God has commanded us for something that has no biblical basis, then all the more so, this is the case here. But this doesn't answer the question. This doesn't answer the question of why don't we, it seems to be it makes more sense to say al mitzvat zakenim. This is what the zakenim commanded us. The problem with that is that virtually all birkot hamitzvah and all brachot are very specific, and say al mitzvat zakenim could be for anything. It's the equivalent of a neighbor of mine, a non-Jewish neighbor of mine, saying he didn't want to mention Christmas. Have happy holidays. Happy holidays is it has no flavor. You either wish somebody a happy Hanukkah or Christians wish themselves something specific about their holiday. Now, the point there is that it is specific, and therefore, if it is specific, then this is the case that we could say, number one, that when there is a debate among rabbinic scholars, and both sides have ample arguments, like Rava and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi have ample arguments for saying it one way or the other, then Seirei Echa Am Noheg, go and see what popular practice is. And popular practice was already observing the holiday as a political military victory, but also the religious aspect of lighting lights. It's no accident that this time of year, when the darkest days, and therefore, in that case, there are arguments on both sides. It would seem that the people were treating it similar to what we call halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Halacha Moshe Sinai is an old practice that people are observing as if it were written in the Torah, but we don't know where it is written in the Torah. So we trace it back to Moses himself. And that is the case here. And what we can argue for the rationality of saying Asher Kiddushanu Mitzvotav, it seems to be that if Chanukah had occurred at the time of the giving of the Torah, then God would have certainly commanded us to do what we are doing, lighting candles. It is a retrospective lens. And in that respect, this reflects, I think, the theology of Rabbi Schultz mentioned I'm a student of Hagon Reb Shaul Lieberman Zatzal, but I was also a student of Hagon Reb Yeshua Heschel Zatzal. And in his book, Torah Min Shemayim, his great work on rabbinic theology, he emphasized that the view of Rabbi Ishmael is that the Torah was not pre-written totally before its giving, in fact, before the creation of the world, but the view of Rabbi Ishmael that only the general principles, the klalot, were given at Sinai, and the pratim and the various things were worked out in the Ohel Moed. Now, if one was at the tent of meeting, if one looks at the Ohel Moed as kind of a proto-bet midrash, then a number of the things that were worked out in the Ohel Moed were Diber HaKatuv B'Hodveh, that were reflected the reality of the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. So in that sense, that I think that the argument in favor of Asher Kiddushanu B'Mitzvotav Ladlik Ner Shel Chanukah, I mean, as halacha l'maseh, it depends upon popular usage. But if one wants to think of a better argument for saying Ladlik Ner Shel Chanukah as distinct from Al Mitzvah Zakenim, one can think of reasons why Mitzvah Zakenim is too general to be a bracha. But if one looks upon it that way, then it is the case that if Chanukah, like Pesach, like Kriyat Yamsuf, had occurred during the time of the giving of the Torah, then God would certainly command us directly a mitzvah to remember it. And I think that becomes the uh, the question here, uh, and the point here. And I would like to conclude, since I quoted Professor Heschel, uh, uh, with a quote from the Gerer Rebbe, the Sfas Emes, who Professor Heschel said was the greatest Hasidic thinker of the late 19th and early 20th century. And in his work and his one of his drashot on Chanukah, he says that the formulation of the Torah Shebaal Peh is of the oral Torah, which is, if you look at the Rambam carefully, oral Torah doesn't mean things that are handed down, traditions that are handed down orally, but it means public reasoning, the reasoning of the sages. Look at the beginning of Hilchot Mamrim in the Rambam. He says that therefore the formulation of the Torah of the oral Torah, that is which is worked out by the reasoning of the sages, which is faithful to the sources and also cognizant of the reality of Knesset Israel, meaning the observant Jewish community. He said, Pele Gadol is a great miracle. Shechachamim yicholim lohosif ala Torah b'divreihem osim rosha shamayim. He said that the sages are able to add on to the Torah, even though we make distinctions between mitzvot deraita, biblically based mitzvot, and mitzvot d'Rabbanan, but to add on to the Torah, and their words make an impression, a roshem, on heaven. And that is what it seems to be based on these sources, that the debates over what Chanukah is and what bracha you make were very instructive in the formulative period of the halacha. And therefore, when we reflect on Tamei mitzvot, the reasons for the commandments, whether they're biblically ordained or rabbinically ordained, it's important for us to go back to these sources and realize that these were matters of debate and ultimately reflected theological points of view that were within the Dalet Amot of halacha, but nevertheless influence sages to adopt one view rather than the other view. And this is why I should have, was Chanukah a halachic problem? Yes, it was. And it's fascinating to see how it was worked out. The example that I could give of Chanukah is Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day. Israel Independence Day, most of us regard as a nace, as something that, against overwhelming odds, we have a Jewish state, and which has endured despite all kinds of normal impediments that would have put an end to other states. And it has a very secular tone to it. The attempts to make it a religious holiday, I think of the dispute between Rav Goren, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, and Rav Ovadia Yosef, the Sephardic chief rabbi, on how Hallel is to be said, whether it's with a bracha or whether without a bracha. reflects some of the debate that I see in the formulation of Hanukkah. Yom HaAtzmaut is still too new for us to decide what it is going to mean in future generations. But like Hanukkah, if I can offer some kind of guesswork prediction, like Hanukkah, it has to have a specific ritual connected to it that we might be able to say Asher Kiddushanu Mitzvata Vitzivanu. Without that, Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the water drawing, we don't have the temple at present for that. But like Hanukkah, the rabbis realized that it had to have a specific ritual that we could say Asher Kiddushanu Mitzvata Vitzivanu. So that are some of my thoughts on the formulation of Hanukkah. Thank you for listening.
Outstanding, Rabbi Novak. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to refer now to the chat to see if any questions were asked. Naturally, my dear friend and colleague, Noah Gradovsky. So Noah, you may unmute yourself if you would like to share your question.
So I wanted to push back on the assumption that if it happened during Torah times, that God would have instituted a holiday for Hanukkah. Insofar as I am stretched to think of any of the very, very many military victories mostly in the prophets, but also in Torah, including victory over the Amalekites, for instance, and the conquest of the areas east of the Jordan. None of those military victories resulted in the creation of or institution of a holiday. I guess, Rabbi Novak, I think you somewhat anticipated this question with Pesach, although I think there's a lot more being celebrated there than a military victory. So I just, I guess I question whether or not a military victory would have been something for which the Kadosh Baruch Hu would have instituted a holiday, and wonder if some of my reticence towards that might also have been some of the reticence of Chazal towards the institution of Hanukkah, although my guess is their dislike for the Hashmonaim was probably a bigger factor there.
Yeah, so the dislike of the Hashmonaim, the fact is that Hanukkah is not only a celebration of a military victory, it's a celebration of a political victory. The Jews gained quasi-sovereignty in the Seleucid Empire that they hadn't. Then it was blown apart by Alexander and Aristobulus in the quarrel. I think it was Alexander who called in the Romans. So therefore, it wasn't only military, it was political. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, especially, wanted to emphasize the religious aspect rather than the political independence. We know his close ties to the Roman Empire. Antoninus is called the Caesar, but he's probably the Roman governor of what's Roman Palestine, and that is the question. Is the people were celebrating it for also we know that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, I mean, it's debated between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi to what extent he wanted to eliminate Tisha B'Av. And that is toned down conservatively because Tisha B'Av has a biblical basis. but the emphasis of political independence is a factor. And that's why Hanukkah celebrations in recent times, the Zionist movement, Maccabiah, sporting events, the emphasis of the political aspect, which I think was sublimated, to use a psychological term, into the religious celebration. Still, there's their Pirsuma Nisa. There's the public proclamation of the miracle, which Rav Moshe Isserles Rama says that if it's dangerous politically for you to put the menorah in a window where everybody can see it, then you fulfill the mitzvah even if you draw the blinds. And we had an instance here last week in Toronto where in a building of mostly elderly Russian Jews, somebody ripped off a number of the mezuzot on their doors. That's a political statement. So the question there is the political enemies, and not only the military victories, but the political question, how was it was sublimated into the nace of the oil that was by normal standards would only burn for one day and burned for 8 days.
Thank you. I appreciate that different framing. I see Daniel K., who's more polite than we usually are and has raised his hand, but also put into the chat a question about the difference between Purim and Tisha B'Av, where we make a bracha on Purim, but not on Tisha B'Av. And Daniel, if you'd like to unmute to flesh out your question any further, please feel free.
Well, it's interesting. The Vilna Gaon said that you make a bracha on the reading of Megillat Eicha. Most of us don't. I think that that is a question. I mean, it makes perfect sense. We make a bracha on Megillat Esther. Why shouldn't we make a bracha on other Megillot? It's a question of Puchasei Da'amadabar. Is popular usage was did not seem to be in favor of that. And Safek brachot lahakel, when it's doubtful whether to make a bracha, you don't make it. So one can think of all kinds of halachic reasons. But if Jews in any great numbers had decided to follow the opinion of the Gaon of Vilna, then we would be making a bracha on the other 4 Megillot that we only make the bracha on Megillat Esther. Of course, it's connected to the holiday of Purim, where we do lots of other things, whereas on Tisha B'Av, we only read the Megillah. It's what we don't do.
I'd rather celebrate than mourn if I have a choice. Right? So when Purim is a happy holiday, and Tisha B'Av.
That is the case there, but some other questions or comments. I think Rabbi Gordon.
Yes, Rabbi Gordon, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. I just wanted to get involved a little bit in the Noah's pushback. I think, I mean, use the word political, and I understand what you mean by that. But I think it ties very much into what you were saying at the very beginning. You're talking about what the people are doing in the political context. In other words, it's not a theoretical argument. It's because there's a living, vibrant state in which people have control, or at least more control, over their lives as Jews. And whatever the semblance of it in terms of political designations between state, homeland, whatever we want to do with that, I think it's not in the abstract, it's in the reality of doing it. In Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's time, perhaps he would have reacted differently because there really wasn't a semblance of that. He was, living in the north in much smaller communities, isolated, broken up, and so forth. So I think that point that you make, which I often teach to explain rabbinic teaching that is not necessarily follows the pshat of the Torah, is that you have to deal with what had been happening historically in order to understand where the rabbis were and where they should have been, I think, as well.
Yes, and definitely historically, uh, at a time when we have a Jewish state, uh, it would seem that the political aspect of Hanukkah would call for, revival in that sense. The ones who understand the political atmosphere, especially related to Hanukkah, is Chabad. Chabad, in terms, in the American Jewish community, it used to be a dogma that we were in favor of no religion in the public square, because it was going to be Christian religion and they were going to force it on us and whatever. Chabad understood the American mentality better. And they said, if you have yours, we'll have ours. And that changed the whole lay of the land, because they emphasized that what it is to be citizens of a state where you don't have to hide behind a curtain, Pirsum Nisa, the proclamation of the miracle. And under those circumstances, this is what is an understanding of the political context. Now, political context means in the broadest possible sense. It doesn't mean the local mayor shows up for the lighting of the candles because he has Jewish constituents. It is a political statement, and everything in our tradition. Baruch Spinoza, who left the path of religious observance, understood that reality, the theological, political, that we are a religion of a people. And peoples there's a political reality. There's also a theological reality. And the two are intertwined. And sometimes we emphasize the political and de-emphasize the theological, not ruling it out totally. And sometimes we emphasize the theological and subdue the political. Which is, I think, what Chazal did by emphasizing the nace of the oil for the Bet HaMikdash as distinct from Jewish sovereignty, which at the time of the formulations of the Halakha in the Tannaitic period and early Amoraic period, with Jews did not have that power, certainly in the land of Israel.
Can I just add something that I typed as part of also what you said before? Um, I witnessed this and I've been surprised because I didn't know about it. But
Who
in
is
Israel,
speaking?
it,
Oh, Rabbi Gordon. Yes.
in Israel, they do recite a bracha over a Megillah if they're reading it from a scroll. And I had experienced this, and I understand it's pretty widespread. So they have modified that, at least in terms of our experience here in the United States.
Well, I mean, if that's the practice there, then I'm sure they have on what to base it on. There's no reason why not to do it, but there has to be in the question of uttering a brachot, there has to be a reason, either a textual reason or a historical reason for reciting brachot. So undoubtedly, somebody in Israel, I'm sure, has thought of arguments similar to the Gaon of Vilna of making a bracha when reading Megillat Eicha.
Someone asked in the chat, what would be required to make Yom HaAtzmaut an obligatory religious holiday?
What would be to make it? If a majority of the Jewish people took it upon themselves as a religious obligation. I mean, it's very similar to Halacha Moshe Sinai. Halakha Moshe Sinai is an old Professor Lieberman frequently referred in his works to Halacha Atika, an old halacha, an ancient halacha that nobody knows the source of it, so we trace it back to Moshe Rabbeinu. But it's a practice that people are practicing as if it were written in the Torah. And in fact, if in the Talmud, you find that the rabbis tried as much as possible to find a biblical basis for things that were not Gezerat HaKatuv, were not explicitly biblical. Some say that was to counter the Sadducees, who accused them of introducing a new religion as opposed to as distinct from biblical religion. So that would be the case. It's a question of how it develops. How it develops at the present time. It's a question of whether you say Hallel, at what point in the service you say it, and whether you say with the bracha or without the bracha. It's still in the formulative stage. And the text I was reading for you seems to be Chanukah is still in the formulative stage. It's still gestating. And there hasn't been a definite conclusion. But we will see. We will see what transpires. But you can't just make up holidays. They have to either be based on the Torah or arise from pretty much popular consensus that this is something as if it were written in אף על פי שלא נכתב, כאילו נכתב. That is what would seem to be the case. And the example of Yom HaAtzmaut, because the debates of Yom HaAtzmaut remind me of the debates in the days of the Talmud of how Hanukkah is to be structured, because Hanukkah is the new kid on the block.
Rabbi Novak, this is Richard Buckwalter. I was the one who asked that question. I just wanted to ask you a further question in relation to that. Since the establishment of the State of Israel is the most radical modification of the Galut, it seems, I was just wondering if there are good arguments for this, very good arguments, and what you think the strongest arguments for it are.
Well, the strongest arguments would be that this is a nace, certainly as great or greater than the nace of the Maccabean victory, and therefore one could proceed accordingly. But unlike the Maccabean victory, there is no specific ritual that has emerged yet in terms of that. So to create a holiday without a specific ritual is something that is utopian thinking. That would be the question now, whether something emerges, but the emergence of tradition, the development of tradition, is something that you can't fast forward any more than you can control biological evolution. Biological evolution, the evolutionary theories are all retrospective, not prospective, and therefore we have to wait and see.
There is one ritual that's developing. That's a 2 minute of silence on Yom HaAtzmaut. I guess you can make a bracha that commanded us to remember Yom HaAtzmaut.
Well, yeah. I mean, 2 minutes of silence is not something that you do. You can, and it's on Yom HaZikaron, which is actually the day before, when we remember those who have fallen in battle. But in the Milchemet HaShachur and the War of Independence and other battles for Israel's survival. But that is, I mean, I'm using that as an example of something that's in a state of formulation, which Hanukkah was, but it is no longer, except that the political military aspect of Hanukkah has been re-emphasized with the rise of the Zionist movement.
Okay,
So
sorry.
that causes us to think of these things as not totally antiquarian exercises.
Okay, I want to thank Rabbi Novak for his presentation and everyone for joining us, and wish everyone a happy Hanukkah. We thank our sponsors who we listed at the beginning and put into the chat just now. We welcome your feedback. There's a link in the chat, and we'll come with the email with the video of this program as well. And if you want to mark your calendars, for January 18th, we look forward to hearing from Chacham Isaac Sassoon on the topic of giur, of conversion. And more information will follow through the UTJ email list and social media as soon as we can disseminate that. Again, wishing everyone a very happy Hanukkah, and thanks again to Rabbi Novak.
Okay, thank you for listening.